My name is Akila Jeffrey. My pen name is A. Jeffrey. I'm an educator, I'm an author, and an attorney from Oakland, California, originally. I was raised in Oakland. And I teach at Delta Community College in San Joaquin County, California. I teach legal studies there in law and social change, and also I teach at a high school. I teach government, economics, and ethnic studies. I got my law degree from Vanderbilt University. I went to Berkeley, kind of a Bay Area, Northern California kind of a person, and this is my second time in Rwanda. I didn't realize I was an author for a long time. I started writing stories when I was a child. My first story was about a dog I called Sweet Tarts. Sweet Tarts the dog. And so it started there. I didn't take it seriously as a writer until later in life. So I guess I officially became an author maybe about 10 years ago, when I wrote a story called A Race Car Dad. So that would probably be the beginning of it. I have 3 books so far. Race Car Dad, there's another one called The Boy Who Watched the Stars, and this one, Wiru Wilda Silva. It's about an 11-year-old girl who lived in San Francisco, California, and she is the only child of a single parent. They were priced out of San Francisco, so they couldn't afford to continue to rent their apartment there, so they went looking for another place to live, and they ended up in the Pacific Northwest. And so she plays the flute, and her talent attracts the people from the fairy world to her, and she ends up on this mission that she didn't realize she was part of, but she ends up being recruited for a mission to find a long-lost king of the fairy people. And so this story has cultures from around the world that are represented in the story. Well, actually, this is my first fantasy. The other books are children's books, but this is my first fantasy middle grade book. The idea to translate it came to mind when I visited Imagine We, and Sandrine is one of the people who suggested, why don't we consider this book in Kinyarwanda? And I thought it was a great idea. So I'm a proponent of championing one's language and preserving one's language. So I think that's really important, and that's why I wanted to do it. And as an African American, I feel that it's one of the things that many of us long for, to be able to connect with our ancestral past through language. And it was something that was lost. And so I feel that it's just very important, and it's a really special thing to be able to protect one's language. I came to Rwanda when one of the principals, a former principal at a high school where I work, is on the board of Ramagana Leaders School in Ramagana. And she really expressed how much she loved Rwanda and how much she thought that teachers should come and have an opportunity to volunteer at the high school and just see the country and really learn about things like restorative justice and a lot of the good work that's happening here. And so having a principal who had a vision of the school, of Ramagana Leaders School, and what teachers could bring, it really encouraged me to come and see it. And also, I'd heard good things about Rwanda. I'd heard about how clean it is and how beautiful it is. And so I wanted to come and see for myself. So when I came, I volunteered at the school and I taught creative writing. And then I met with the publishers at Imagine We about my book. I shared my book with some of the students at Ramagana Leader School, but I didn't have a lot of copies, and they were saying they would love to have the book, and I didn't have books to give them, so I thought, well, I should probably find a way to get this published in Rwanda. So that's how I ended up looking for a publisher, and I found Imagine We. It's currently available in English and Kinyarwanda, and there is a French translation that has not been released yet. So I'm looking forward to releasing it in the future in French. In translating the book, I worked with Imagine We and their staff. Their staff translated the book, and they would ask me questions about some of the terms, like some of the slang, and I explained it. And I also had a friend of mine who speaks Kinyarwanda take a look at the translation and give some feedback on it. And I really felt like this entire process has been very supportive. They have really allowed me to have a voice, and an unrestricted voice, and it's just been a beautiful process. I believe that it took about 5 or 6 months to translate. Yes. Well, not just translating, but going back and editing and making sure that that it was explaining things. Like, for example, there's a city called Tacoma. For people in the United States, they're probably a little bit more familiar with it, especially from the Pacific Northwest. But in Kinyarwanda, Tacoma is what is Tacoma. Yeah. And so that was important to be able to go back and take a look at little words like that and explain them. The story stayed in Washington State, where it does snow, especially in the region where the main character, Wilda Silva, lives. And so the publishers at Imagine We and translators made sure that they explained what it's like when you have a lot of snow or sleet, and what it's like to have black ice, and how slippery that is. So they really focused on making sure people could understand those things, but it takes place in Washington State. My DNA map is all over sub-Saharan Africa, so it's literally every part of sub-Saharan Africa, and I consider all of Africa, to be something that is a part of me, a part of what makes me. In my family heritage, we were able to preserve a little bit of our history. I do know that I had an ancestor who was taken from Madagascar and brought to America, and it's a very tragic story. Slavery was brutal, it was tough, and it affected people from throughout the continent. And people were being brought from inland to the shores. So my heritage reflects that. Major themes that are explored in the book include bullying and alcoholism, and being a child of someone who has an addiction, as well as self-discovery and becoming more friendly and social, and learning how to fit in a different environment, but also learning to accept people and being more tolerant towards people who are not necessarily just like you. So all those things are in the book. In my experience of volunteering at Ramagana Leader School, I had an opportunity to sit in with one of the programs that they do there, which is reaching out to past graduates who maybe need more support in some of their life choices, and also in developing skills that they can use to help them in the workplace. And I think that that helped me to understand that a lot of things are universal. So a lot of the same issues that students deal with in Rwanda are similar to the U.S. So learning to have confidence in yourself, discovering your own talents, and learning how to make a positive contribution to your community. Those things are universal. And I think the characters in the book learn about their own skills, their own talents. When I was teaching at the school, I was able to read some of the writing of the students, and I was really blown away by how incredibly talented they are. And I can't wait until some of them, hopefully they decide to become writers professionally. I can't wait to see what they actually put out there, and to be able to say that I was one of the people who read one of their early works. When I was at Ramagana Leader School, I didn't really see bullying. I think they really fostered an environment there of friendship and of respect. So I didn't see that there. But in my experience of teaching in America, I have seen it once in a while, and it's one of the things that, as an educator, that we deal with head on, and we try to help students foster a sense of community so that they don't have that issue. So bullying is something that we take very seriously. The concept of a fairy, what is a fairy? And so that was something that we had some discussions on. How do you describe a fairy being and fairy magic, and also things that you'll find more in the Pacific Northwest, like the snow, and how do you describe that in Kinyarwanda to children so that they understand it. But we had a few discussions though about the fairy beings and fairy powers. But when I was writing this, I was inspired by the Aziza fairies of Benin. And in my research, I learned that fairies are parts of folklore from throughout the world. So there are stories of fairies or fae in Asia and in Ireland and also West Africa. And so I wanted the book to reflect that, and I wanted it to be representative of the people of the community in Washington State, in that city of Belfair, Washington, which is a multi-ethnic community. Kinyarwanda just sounds sophisticated. Yes, when you hear people speak it, it sounds sophisticated, and it has this kind of melody to it. You know, it doesn't have a lot of sharp angles, so it just has kind of this flow. If there are certain things that people overlook about the translating process, I would say you probably need to have native speakers. You probably need to have native speakers to translate it, because they're going to have more insight into how people talk. So the characters in the book, some of them are children. One of them has an attitude. Her name is Dana. She's kind of a bad fairy. She kind of has an attitude. She's a teen with an attitude. And then there is a teen who's good, Rima. And some of them use slang. So I think that it's important to have a native speaker to help with translating, and have a native speaker read it and make sure that it makes sense. And also, I think it's important to not overlook African languages. It's a great idea to have more things translated into African languages, and to support those authors who are writing in their languages. I think maybe some people might not recognize how large the audience is in Africa of readers, and and people who want to be able to read something in their language. I would like to translate it into more languages. I think that's one of the really wonderful things about storytelling, is being able to reach people wherever they are. And there's a saying by an African American thinker, I think it was Booker T. Washington, who said, "Cast your lot where you are." So when I first came to Rwanda, I thought, yeah, it should be translated into Kinyarwanda. This is where I am. This is, for whatever reason, the universe, God, has blessed me to be able to experience this country. And it should be translated into this language. And hopefully other languages as well. I would love to have it translated into Kiswahili. I would love to have it translated into a language in West Africa, perhaps Igbo, perhaps a language in South Africa. So you mentioned Zulu, maybe Zulu. So yes, I'm open to exploring how it can be translated into other languages in Africa. I read something, actually there's a book that Imagine We published, which is kind of like, it could be kind of fantasy, and I think it's called a tea time. I'm trying to remember, but it was about these characters who are sharing tea, and they're kind of imagining that they're in different places in the world. And so it's kind of like it's the same three friends, but they're experiencing tea in the different traditions, and the Japanese tea ceremony, and in England, and just different ways. So it's kind of fantasy-like to me. And there's also there's a book called Isolde, that is kind of like a fairy tale, and that one is also published by Imagine We. So those are two that I can think of. But I also like a book called ABCs of Rwanda. It's not fantasy, but I think it's a really cute children's book, and I think people should check it out because I really liked it. I learned that it's really important to rely on native speakers to translate in Kinyarwanda. When I would try to look something up, and let's say Google Translate, and then approach Imagine We and say, hey, is this a way I'm thinking of, maybe this phrase or this sentence, is this, how this could be, this concept, is this how I should think about that concept in Kinyarwanda? And it would be something that would be nonsensical, because a lot of times when I would use apps, they just would not really make a lot of sense. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous, but my family would love to be here. They couldn't come. My brother had an important test for his work, so he couldn't come. State testing. And my parents, my mother was going to come with me. She couldn't make it at the last minute. And my dad told me, because he also wanted to come, but for him it's a bit of a challenge as far as mobility. But nowadays, but he did really want to be here, and so I'm showing him. I'm able to take video and show him some of the country that I see, and my family is just so excited to see it all, and so supportive. So I'm excited. They're excited. I'm a little nervous, but yeah, I honestly I can't wait until the launch. Well, I'm going to read some of the book, and I'm going to have copies in Kinyarwanda, and Imagine We is going to have one of their translators or staff member to read the Kinyarwanda version so that I don't butcher it, because I would love for it to sound like the characters in the book. Yeah, we're going to read excerpts of it, and I'm going to be signing some books and talking about it. So all of that, I'm looking forward to that, and that's at the Kigali Public Library on Friday, June 30th at 2 p.m. So I'm really looking forward to it. The book will be available through Imagine We's website, and it will also be available at bookstores. So in writing about Wilda, I was inspired by the stories of, or the experiences of people, of young people I've known who have had to deal with the issue of addiction in their families. So I wanted to depict that and show them ways of coping with that, and how to reach out to people who can help them. And also I was hoping that I could show that young people do have power and they do have talent, and that they should believe in themselves. And also, as far as the bullying in the book, give people a chance, really, and don't assume things about people, but respect everyone as an individual.